under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey everybody, good evening and welcome to another edition of your favorite soccer podcast. I'm just kidding. It's probably your least favorite. I don't know. Just checking the temperature. No, it's Stateside Footy here on a Tuesday evening. And of course, man, we have a really big show tonight as I welcome on a very talented guest. But before we get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Because yeah, man, that's the only right thing to do as far as I'm concerned, man. Make sure you let the algorithm do exactly what the hell that is supposed to do. And of course, I've been explained how it works like at least a half a dozen times, but of course I wasn't paying attention because it's not English. So anyway, speaking of our guest tonight, I gotta be honest with you, man. I was kind of revved up for this one as I reached out on the old X machine and he said yes. So I figured, why not, man? Right now is better than later. So he's one half of the Eyes and Five podcast, which is an excellent name for a podcast. His name is Trevor, but he goes by USMNT Trev. Good evening, Trevor. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. And let me tell you, that intro, man, I wanted to run out on the field right with all the guys there. That was excellent. I haven't seen an intro like that yet in the pods that I've joined. So kudos to you there.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that intro is like for like 5 straight episodes, right? I always start off by saying, I swear to God, I wish we had a Jermaine Jones in the club right now, because every single time I see Jermaine Jones just piling in bangers, I'm like, God damn it, he really was that incredible player. I was like to the point where I was like, shit, man, I'd even take an Eddie Johnson at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, one of my coworkers at work actually attended the World Cup there, where he hit his absolute screamer, and he was behind the goal, and he said it was a magical experience.
Yeah, World Cup 2014, in Brazil, and what's interesting is my brother actually went to World Cup 2014. At that point in time, he was getting his jet center trend, and of course he goes everywhere for soccer. But at that point, unfortunately, being married with kids wasn't necessarily in the books. But I watched every single match of it, though, because it's, World Cup. So it is what it is. All right. So today, by the way, for those that have been paying attention to USMNT social media today, at least it was rumored, by the way, that today the October rosters were going to drop. And of course, yesterday, for those that were paying attention, I actually did an October, I guess you can say a roster projection based on the amount of players that we saw in the September window, which ended up being right around 24. Quick question for you. Number one, what is your expectation specifically for this upcoming October roster? What is it that you're looking to see? And conversely, what are you not wanting to see?
Yeah. So, I mean, my expectation is that we call up a competent group of individuals. That's the expectation this time around. I feel like we experimented. We have continued to experiment in a lot of ways with roster call-ups, but there hasn't been that consistency there that gets you thinking, oh man, we're heading towards the World Cup with some momentum now. That's what I want this window. I want to see guys where they're going to be on the field, most likely, unless they're injured, come 2026 during the World Cup. And in terms of what I want to see from Poch, honestly, it's not even the starters, it's the substitutes. That's what I want to see. I want to see correct and competent substitutions where I go, there's a plan here for why this person is coming in. Not we're just doing the same thing over and over again, but okay, this player fits this role. I was saying on my own Twitter page that for a guy like Brendan Aronson, right? He's got a role to play. Are you going to bring him on if you need a goal late? Probably not. Are you going to bring him on if you need a guy that presses and brings loads of energy? Absolutely, you are. So he's a guy for that sort of reason. I mean, and then you have other players that are role players, and they fit certain roles. Yeah.
Well, perfect example, Jack McGlynn coming off the bench against Japan, right? Where you're looking to add an extra goal to an extra boost, and of course I think he banked 2 off the crossbar in just that little time, right? So that right there was a definitive role. But the interesting thing about this is I don't understand the vitriol a little bit towards Mauricio Pochettino. The interesting thing, he even said this, if I can dig up the quote real quick, but he was saying the 18 months is, the 18 months was doable. But that being said, if you look at the context of a full 4-year cycle, what he's actually doing is something that any coach would be doing in his first year and a half, 2 years, at the beginning of the cycle, right? It's trying to find diamonds in the rough. It's trying to find players, specifically to your point, that it's like on the back end of your bench, where if you're in a match where you're tied 1-1 and you got 15 minutes left and you're trying to hang on for dear life, right? Not necessarily searching for a winner, but also just kind of searching for a point, because as you know how World Cup group stage plays out, right? There's going to be times where a point is good enough and you're trying to hang on for dear life. And so you need people that when you look down the end of your bench and you're like, shit, who do I got that I can put in right now that I actually can trust that's actually not going to be a liability with play, but also when it comes to tactically, it's not a liability. And to me, that was exactly what he was doing with World Cup and what he was doing with the September roster, i.e., which is why you got a Christian Roldan in camp and why you got some of these MLS guys in camp, because at the end of the day, it's like, I think he already knows who his best 15 to 20 players are. Like, I think it kind of goes without saying that he knows who Christian Pulisic is, and he knows who Malik Tillman are, and he knows who these players are, right? So it wasn't an issue of him. I don't buy into the fact that he was sending a message. I just don't believe it, right? It's like he knows they're going to be there come July 2026, right? That's not the issue. It's the issue is like, who are going to be the last 5 on the roster? Is there somebody from the domestic league that's actually worth calling in, or is this going to be like, well, I know I got Marlon Fossey at Standard Liège, or I got Brian Reynolds at Westerlo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean that's very important for sure. Is to find those guys, but I want to. You talked about how he sort of has his 20 in mind and is trying to find some MLS diamonds in the rough. I do want to bring up the fact that we have a guy that's performing in a top 5, top 6 league, arguably, on one of the very top teams who has not been called up since March, and that's Tanner Tessman, and that's that's been a surprising one for me. I've got to say, I thought last window he would get a call up. I understand that with him moving club, perhaps that was something that they considered, but for me, Tessman was sort of a head scratcher, and if I would expect to see him called up this window, but
I do too.
Yeah, so I would absolutely, I would hope to see that, especially with the injuries. I don't know if Cardoso is going to be fit in time. He's not been playing games.
Yeah, not for the October window, not at all. Yeah. This is I would probably assume that we're not, like, depending on how things progress with Cardoso, and depending on how severe the ankle injury is, like, he might even be a scratch for the November window as well, too, right? We're talking like March, maybe next year. But the interesting thing about it is, it's again, like, when I think about the top 15 to 20 players, I would assume Tessman's probably going to be in that, in that group, right? Just considering that, he made the move last year from Venezia to Olympic Lyon. And it did, like, when he made that move last year, I knew that was going to be a little bit of a jump, and it was going to take some time for him. I mean, let's be honest, right? You're an American that's in Italy, and now you go from Italy to France, so now you're learning a whole new language. You're learning the intricacies. Excuse me, I can't speak English of that country. Now all of a sudden you have to adapt to a new head coach, a new system. I knew it was going to be some growing pains as far as Tessman was concerned, but you would probably think that after a full camp, a full summer camp that with Lyon, understanding exactly what your expectations are, what exactly the expectations of your coach, where you sit with the coach, that he was going to hit the ground running, and sure enough, he did hit the ground running. Again, I just didn't look at the September camp as anything much to do about anything, because at the end of the day, I think we actually got some very good performances from that group of sixes that were in that camp in September. So from that center defensive mid position, I wasn't necessarily too concerned, but I 100% agree with you at this point, right? Because for as good as, and maybe I was the only one that actually thought that Christian Roldan wasn't a liability. But from that standpoint, there's a different level going from that to that, right? And so if you imagine that you're bringing in a Tanner Tessman in form, right, putting out fires on one side of the pitch that allows Tyler Adams to do the other, it almost seems like it's a no-brainer. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I understand, to an extent where you would want to experiment, but I think it's too late in the cycle to be doing that. And I understand that this camp is sort of this cutoff. I would have argued that one camp before. I really do think that September window could have been a bigger momentum builder. Now, saying that, I think we're going to get to see some of these guys that we saw last window purely because of injuries. Some of our top guys are going to be out. Your Dest, your Pepe, your Johnny Cardosos. They're all unfortunately probably going to be out next window. And that will mean, okay, we're going to get some other names in there that we did see in September, and will likely be back again.
So Dest got hurt again, huh? Because I thought he would. Okay, fair enough. I was wondering whether that was rotation or whether that was injury. So there you go. I knew about the leg. Yeah, I knew about the leg strain, the strain of Pepe, and of course Cardoso. That's actually kind of disconcerting. But that being said, it also might develop a new opportunity for a guy like Joe Scally, who, by the way, if you have been paying attention to his play at Borussia Mönchengladbach, he's not playing the stay-at-home right back position that everybody just assumes that he is. He's actually getting forward. As a matter of fact, this last weekend, he had 2 assists in that lopsided loss. I think it was to Eintracht Frankfurt. But the interesting thing is I do want to talk about 2 different players. And obviously there are, essentially what I would consider the box-to-box midfield, the center mid. And that is Weston McKennie, who did get on the pitch this last weekend for Juventus, and then also Yunus Musa as well, too. 2 names that I think that even Mauricio Pochettino called him out by name during the last press conference that he had. So it probably naturally would conclude that they're probably going to be a part of this group in October. But that being said, both of them are not getting minutes. In the case of Yunus Musa, he's playing behind Pasalic, I believe Atlanta's club captain. So it's very hard for him to get minutes. I think this last weekend he only got maybe 6 to 12, something like that. It was a very small
past 80. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He's barely featuring. At least West is getting some minutes. I think he had 30 minutes in this last one as well too. So I mean, half hour is better than 0, right? But that being said, this feels like it's something different for West. Usually, over the course of the last couple seasons, he's kind of fallen out of favor with his coach. But then by November, he's worked his way back into the first team to the point where he's actually getting minutes. And then, of course, he goes on to actually have a productive season. For whatever reason, this just feels a little differently for me for West. Is there any concern for you, specifically those 2, that whether or not they're going to be on the roster? I think that seems kind of obvious, but whether or not they're not necessarily going to be in the form that they absolutely should be going against a team like Ecuador?
Yeah, no, I mean, so form is really important to start with. Absolutely. For these sort of international matches, you want to be in your best possible form. And we have 2 different cases here. The first one is the Musa case of he's playing the position that he plays, but he's getting 10 minutes. And then in Wes's case, man, they'll play him anywhere. I mean, they'd make him water boy if they needed to. I mean, seriously, they'll play him anywhere on the field. I'm sure he's doing interviews when he's not playing because they feel perfectly comfortable putting him at any position. And
Correct.
that's good in some ways because, yeah, it does emphasize his versatility. But on the other hand, he's not getting constant every week experience in his best position. He's just sort of floating right now. And I don't
It
love
feels like, yeah, because it feels like he's on the periphery, right?
Mhm.
And the interesting thing, though, is, right, so now I guess the question is like, what formation is Poch going to use? Is he going to go back to that back three with the 4? Because if that's the case, then that's fine, because I guess that suits Wes, because he's been playing on the left side of a back three system, right? He's not necessarily playing in that box to box role. He's been used on the left side a majority of the time, right? And so from that standpoint, I guess it gives a little versatility for Mauricio Pochettino. But that being said, it's like it makes you wonder exactly where he fits, right? Because the question is Pochettino going to go back to the back four with the double pivot where it might suit him a little bit better, or is he going to stick with the back three? And in that case, it almost feels like it's going to be 2 6s and 2 high 10s, right?
Yeah,
It's like, where does that leave him?
I think we are built for a double pivot. I would say based on our player profile, but I would say based on how the team plays, a back three seems to be the way. We looked pretty solid in that way. And then also, I hope that the Jedi is fully ready for the World Cup. But if he's not, if Arfston really is that backup, if that's who Poch sees as the backup guy who's going to take the mantle for Jedi, he needs to be in a wing back role where there is defensive cover. I can't see him as an out and out left back. I don't think that fits him very well. It's not what he plays at Columbus. And I don't think it's realistic to bring him into some of the biggest games he's ever played and say, yes, you have significant defensive responsibilities to go along with your attacking mentality. I just don't think it's fair.
I don't understand the love for Max Arfston. By the way, I don't think he's a bad player. I just, when you look at the comparison to a guy like John Tolkien, and I get it, man, he's playing in the second Bundesliga. But that being said, right, when you're talking about playing in a back three with wing backs, right, John Tolkien is kind of that dude. You know what I mean? Featured in the Olympics last year or 2024. But that being said, if he was at the Gold Cup, didn't get a lot of run, which I just don't understand. Especially when you consider the defensive responsibilities as what's required right now in a back five. You actually have that underneath protection from the left-sided center back, and you have the over the top with one of the 6s, right? So so as far as space is concerned, it might not be that big of a deal. But when you have a guy like John Tolkien, who's actually a pretty good 1v1 defender, not to mention the fact he gets forward. And he's actually one of the best wing backs I think we have in the pool. And the fact that he's just not getting run, and not only not getting run, but also not even being acknowledged right now, it just seems over a guy like Max Arfston, dude. I just don't understand it. I just do not get it.
I don't either. But I think what is important here is to recognize that what we want means nothing. Poch is going to select who he wants, and he's made that clear through, Gold Cup playing time.
Sure.
You had a guy like Paxton Aronson, who at that time was abroad, but kind of elevated. He was doing super well in the Eredivisie, and he got 4 minutes in one game and like 5 in another, and that was his entire Gold Cup contribution. That was it. And then Ajimang would play huge minutes, and again, I'm a Charlotte guy. I live in Charlotte, but at the same time, I would love to have seen more rotation there, and we just didn't get it. Poch has his guys, and I think Arfston's one of them. And that's where I'm thinking plan B, okay, if that is his guy and he really is going for him, he's got to be played correctly. If we're playing a back four, Tolkien is absolutely the answer. And I totally agree, even though he is in the second Bundesliga. It doesn't particularly concern me because of how he plays. His style is a lot more defensively solid, and that's what we're missing with an Arfston kind of overlap, charge forward type.
Yeah, better defensively, better crosser, better everything. And by the way, the second Bundesliga, by far and away. It's probably better than the championship, which I rate, but also it's night and day better than Major League Soccer. But I digress. I will say this because you brought up Patrick Aubameyang, and that's going to be something that's kind of interesting to me as well too. Because now that this Ricardo Pepi leg strain has reared its ugly head, right? The question is whether or not this opens up a door for Patrick Aubameyang. You know exactly how much Pochettino has fell in love with Aubameyang over the course of 2025, coming from Camp Cupcake in January all the way through the Nations League, and then of course Gold Cup. Wasn't in the September camp because unfortunately he was dealing with a little bit of a hernia issue, but now he's back. And last weekend against Wrexham, he got 74 minutes, and I think Derby potentially even played today. I got to double check that. But that being said, I think he made his home debut for Derby today. Yeah, made his home debut for Derby today, and I would probably assume that if everything went well, he's probably going to get his first full 90 today. But is the Pepi injury going to open up the door for Patrick Aubameyang now?
Yeah, it's a good question for sure, because we're going to bring 3 strikers. I mean, that does seem like the move there. So we've got Balogun for sure. We're going to have Sargent, I would presume.
Haji.
Well, that's it. Then there's the third one. So is it Aubameyang or is it Haji? Because the thing is, Haji can be a winger, absolutely, but then it opens up. Okay, so who's he playing winger for, or who's he substituting for in that respect? But I'm going to go back to my idea that it doesn't matter who we would plug. Look at the actions of Pochettino. He likes Aubameyang, and believe me, I have seen online the visceral reaction of fans when Aubameyang comes on. They do not like him a lot, and I think they just think he falls over and is clumsy on the ball. But ultimately, Poch sees a role for him, and you're not going to convince the coach otherwise if they believe that he can make an impact and wants to stake minutes on that player. So I would expect to see Aubameyang maybe even over a Haji Wright, or this one would be big, but he's not done anything for the national team scoring wise or over Sargent. But I would expect to see him. And I think someone's going to miss out instead. And I'm not plugging for this again, because I will be careful. Obviously, I have my Charlotte biases, but at the same time, anyone that does follow my page knows I try to stay at moderate in the middle with all this. I don't go, Aji's going to be the answer, but I also don't go, he's the worst player in the world. I'm somewhere in the middle. I just don't think that he's cut out for this roster spot. But that I'm not Poch. So
right. Yeah, and it's interesting because I got a little bit of a Seattle bias being from the Pacific Northwest, and so I got a little love for Jordan Morris, kind of in the same vein as Patrick Aubameyang in Charlotte as well too. But that being said, I will say that the interesting thing about Josh is you wonder whether or not whether or not he's going to get called in. The interesting thing about Norwich City is over the course of the last 4 weeks, like the hot start that Josh got onto, could have been seen as a little bit of a fluke, considering the amount of losses that Norwich City has sustained, and the fact that I probably would assume that their coach is going to get sacked within the next 4 weeks, because Norwich City is looking absolute dog shit right now. I saw their match against Stoke this last weekend, where they just looked absolutely toothless, couldn't get forward, were essentially pinned back for 80 minutes of the entire match, and of course Josh Sargent actually had to play defense in order to help get that done, right? Like, he has not seen a lot of touches in the last 4 weeks. So I guess you can say from a form standpoint, maybe not so much, but from a national team standpoint, he just really has not taken advantage of the opportunities that have been given. And when you look at the fact that Haji right now is an out-and-out center forward for Coventry City now, he's not playing off the left anymore. Mm-hmm. Frank Lampard's got him playing centrally. Yep. And right now I think he's tied for goals with Josh. And I just think he brings a little bit more at this stage. And of course, you mentioned the fact that he can play left. So if Poch wants to go back, to a double pivot with 3 up top, and you can play him out there if you want to do that. If you wanted to out and out start Christian at the 10, you probably could start Haji right out there. But that being said, I think that flexibility kind of gives Haji right a little bit more than what Josh gives you. I don't think, and by the way, and I don't think Damian Downs gets.
I was about to bring
Yeah.
him up. I was going to say, Steve. Yep, he was a
I
guy
don't think-
I didn't even mention because he's off to one of the worst starts I think in like the championship
Sure.
of any signing. I mean, he's deleted his social media already to tell you how bad it's gotten. So yeah,
it's bad. Yeah, pretty bad. And and as much as I like Damian Downs, and by the way, I actually thought it was actually a clever move, him going to Southampton, because, you're talking about a guy that's supremely talented. And it's almost in the same vein where, by November, he probably could have made his way back into the starting 11. Of course, Southampton's one of the teams favored to go up, right? So from that standpoint, if he could put it together next year, he's in the Premier League, right? So, I mean, from that standpoint, I understand the move. But again, it just hasn't really translated. To me, this looks like it might be a Ballo, Haji Wright, Patrick Agyemang type of trio. Like that's the way it feels to me right now.
Yeah, I see it the same way. But the question then becomes, okay, so Ballo is definitely going to be the starter, right?
Against Ecuador, 100%. Yeah,
which
100%.
one is Poch going to look at as his next up option? That I don't have an answer to. I don't know how much Poch likes Haji. Not in terms of as a person,
sure,
but in terms of as his profile, in terms of, okay, I've used him, I've seen him, I know how this player plays. Whereas no one can argue that he has not seen enough of Patrick Agyemang. He knows exactly what that player is,
Right. But let me ask you this real quick. So how do you counter the argument where it's like, okay, fine, we know that Patrick Agyemang is fantastic against Venezuela, in Trinidad and Tobago, and Guatemala, but yet against some of the bigger national teams that he's faced this year, whether it be Switzerland or Turkey or Mexico, he's actually arguably had some of his worst performances in the national team, right? So against CONCACAF minnows, that's certainly one thing. But against teams that, generally speaking, you're going to start seeing come the round of 32 in the World Cup, right? Where you're actually going to need, you're not only you're going to need the hold up play that he gives you, but you're also going to need goals. And against good talent that know how to shut off channels, that won't allow Patrick Agyemang to be Patrick Agyemang. How do you see that, right? Versus, again, I don't know if we know. I don't think we've seen that with Haji Wright or Josh Sargent, I guess, right? So from that standpoint, fair,
yeah,
fair. But at least with Balogun, you kind of know.
Yeah, no, Balogun passes that technical pedigree test.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's levels. That's what I'm trying to get here. There's
levels
between the top of our.
That. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, Aji is not technical enough, and I've said this many times before, and I've seen him as a starter for Charlotte for years. And I said on the national team, if he has any role, if he has a future on the national team, it is as an off the bench sub, down a goal. You need a goal, just chaos in the box kind of player. He is not your 70-minute guy. He just isn't. He can't control the ball that well. He's someone's going to make a late game mistake because they're tired, or someone's going to commit a red card offense because he's last man and he's bullied them into making a rash decision. That is what Patrick Agyemang is. He is not a technical player. I hope he develops that at Derby, but he did not have that at Charlotte. His first touch and his dribble were both pretty horrendous. But he was such a big dude that it didn't matter.
Right.
He just run over the center back and
in Major League Soccer, yeah, you're right. In Major League Soccer, it works.
Yeah,
right?
You have the time and space to make a mistake, and you're all right.
And you look at the discrepancy between attacks and defense in Major League Soccer; it's night and day, right? So, that's the reality. You can bully somebody, not only not get a whistle, but also potentially turn that into a goal in Major League Soccer, which is the reason why it's like there's a reason why a lot of people say that you can't get ready for a World Cup playing in Major League Soccer, and I think that also makes a tremendous amount of sense. But before we turn the page on this subject, the interesting thing is that for the longest time, Christian Pulisic essentially looked, what's the nice word to say to describe his play from essentially Copa America 2024 all the way until the last window, right? So there's a word that I'm looking for. to describe Christian's play with the national team, which is hot garbage. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the term hot garbage. And of course, primarily we were playing with the double pivot in a 3-2-4-1 narrow, trying to play like Tottenham 2016, 2017. And of course, the only problem with that is the fact that we don't have, a prime Harry Kane at the peak of his powers playing up top. Like, we just don't have those type of players. Not only do we not have those type of players, we don't develop those type of players. And because of it, whenever Christian was trying to shade in a little inside, of course, there would be 2-3 defenders, essentially cutting off channels. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to be himself. But that being said, against Japan, we opened it up. And we were essentially playing him underneath, along with Alex and Dejas underneath Ballo, and it seemed to free him up quite a bit. And then all of a sudden, we saw Christian Pulisic be exactly what Christian Pulisic is supposed to be for this national team. And I'm curious to know how you feel about this. Is that, is Pacha's base formation, is that more handcuffs? Because I think it's a little bit more handcuffs than what we saw against Japan. I think because of the system that we threw out against Japan, I think it created so much more space that actually not only did it allow Christian to play free and it looked like he was having fun, but the same thing could be said for Zendejas as well too, who almost seemed stifled on the right hand side in an attacking three.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think that having the ability, which we haven't had the last couple windows, of ideally getting a Jedi back again, I think is going to help Christian a lot because you're going to get those overlapping runs, which are really important. And we did see that with Arfston, for example. So, I mean, I will give him credit there for that one goal that was scored off his excellent cross. That we saw some of that overlap, but at the same time, the levels between an Arfston and a Jedi who's doing it every week in the Premier League. Well, I mean, this season coming back, but he clearly did last year. Yeah, I think that's going to really unlock Christian. And then, man, I wish he was healthy, because I would love to have seen an off the bench at some point in the game intertwining link up between a healthy Gio Reyna and a Christian Pulisic at some point to kind of slide him more to the wing and let Gio kind of in the middle towards the end of one of these games just really play off each other. But we never got to see that. And I don't think we're going to, not this window at least. And I don't know when in the future. Yeah, I like how they play together.
By the way, you and a lot of people are still riding that Gio train. Mm-hmm. So I guess the next question logically is, like, for instance, let's just say everything breaks even and Gio becomes a regular starter at Borussia Mönchengladbach, but also Malik Tillman continues to develop and becomes somebody special at Bayer Leverkusen come 2026. And for instance, let's just say this. Let's say that's the formation. We're playing essentially in a back three, a 3-4-2-1, right? And so you're playing two high tens underneath, right? So is it Malik Tillman or is it Gio off the right with Christian off the left?
Yeah, so it would be, it's good. Obviously Christian is going to be in there.
Yeah,
but
off the left,
But for the other one, I've argued this before, and people either love it or hate it. I don't think that Malik Tillman has done enough to lose his role to a guy that hasn't been playing in multiple years now. I just don't think that's fair. I think that Malik Tillman is showing enough. I do think he's had some poor performances, and there's no way around that. But I don't think that
what's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's going to happen
in a new league. Absolutely, it is. Yeah, and his way of playing looks nonchalant. It's not, but it looks that way. And that's how he's always played. So we can't really fault him for looking like he's not trying 100%, because that's been his argument for a long time. But he creates results. He scores goals. I'm going with him over Gio until Gio plays so well and gets his national team opportunities, and you can't argue that he's creating more opportunity. But he's got to earn it on the field. He can't just earn it off of his name or what he did in the past.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing about Gio. The talent, the flair, the creativity is there. I don't think anybody doubts that. The problem with Gio, it's always been injury. It's always been bad attitude. It's always been, he's always had that entitled sense of that entitlement, man. That has always turned me off. But then, you look at the way his Borussia Dortmund career ended, and then you look at the way that his Mönchengladbach career started, and you're kind of like wondering, it's like, okay, when's this thing going to get rolling? He had that start when he looked good, and then he came off the bench for 10 minutes and he just hasn't featured since. Right. So you're kind of like, yeah. And it looks like, Harry right here says, helicopter parents, it's like 150%. Right. Like, that's the thing that I wanted to see with Gio, is whether or not he had the balls to tell his dad to back off and just let him have his career and show some maturity and just be coached for a season. I always wondered what that would like if he would just shut the fuck up and allow his coaches to coach and just do what they say and see exactly where he ends up at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that, because we saw what happened when his parents really got involved, not just in the World Cup, but also in his transfer dealings. He went to Nottingham Forest and had arguably one of the worst loans I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He had no 100%. Minutes, and that was just a horrific experience. So,
well, he wasn't ready for the Premier League. Let's just keep it real. By the way, Malik Tillman is putting himself in the shop window at Bayer Leverkusen. I think everybody's missed the plot on this one. Right. Everybody's like, oh, that's a great step up from the Eredivisie. I was like, yeah, he's talented. And if he has himself just an unbelievable season, the sky is the limit. He's putting himself in the shop window. I think he thinks he can play in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Let's see. If Gio can't get regular starting get at Gladbach, next stop will be Major League Soccer. That's kind of a good call. Right. I don't think anybody in Europe should come back to Major League Soccer, but if there is one person that kind of fits the profile, it might be Gio Reyna. Because at the end of the day, he's going to get the bag from Major League Soccer, 100%. 100%.
I think what it means, if he doesn't make it here, is either he's injured enough that he's not getting consistent minutes, or he's not cutting it for a bad team in the Bundesliga. And at that point, there's not really anywhere else you can go from there besides maybe back home to a place where you feel more comfortable, versus again trying some other challenge somewhere else. I don't see it at that point. This is another stop here where he's trying to get it back on track. But I just don't know how many more of these you can have before you just kind of have to.
I would like to think that if it doesn't work out in the Bundesliga, there's going to be a team in the Eredivisie, maybe even a PSV, or maybe in the French Ligue 1, or maybe a mid-table in Serie A that looks at it and says, you know what, we see the talent, and this might be an opportunity to get a cheap deal on a player like this.
I'm going to disagree, because I mean, honestly, I think we've at a certain point, a club's going to look and say, how many chances does this kid get? I mean, how long are we going to wait to see the potential? Because I'll tell you, on my page, I talk about Gio a lot.
He's 20. He's like 21, 22 now, right? So he should be starting. Yeah, he 100%. This is the time frame where he should be 100% starting right now.
And the thing is, I can only talk about him for so long as, this player is going to become something. When again, and some of it is no fault of his own. If he's getting injured, I mean, I don't know what the recovery process or how strenuous that is. I don't know where his body is in terms of being able to handle this. So I can't talk about it in that perspective. If he's just getting injured, fair enough. I mean, there's nothing you can do there. But yeah,
The interesting thing, though, is I remember back in the 2022 World Cup where there was like this group of young, hot prospects that were going to revolutionize and reshape the U.S. men's national team. And Gio's name was one of them, along with goalkeepers like Gaga Slonina. And like 4 years later, like they're almost circling the drain of irrelativity right now. It's actually kind of wild to see this happen, if I got to be honest with you.
Yeah, the Gaga one's especially wild. I mean, there was so much momentum with him, and when we stole him away from Poland, everyone was just ecstatic, thinking we were going to get the greatest keeper ever. And I think it's just a reminder that the development progression cycle is certainly not a linear one. That is, there are a lot of ups and downs, swings and roundabouts. The best U.S. players will make it look like it was an easy, we kind of knew it was always going to happen process. But that is not the case. And you can see that with a lot of these loans.
Oh, well, the interesting thing is, like, I wonder who was in his ear that thought this was a good idea to go to Chelsea, right? Like, I can understand the inclination of wanting to, but he should have known straight from the gate he was going to be a part of the loan army, and that's it, right? Like, he wasn't actually going to play for Chelsea. And it's like, had he stayed, I think he's with the Chicago Fire there for a minute, right? So had he stayed like an extra year, maybe two, his development curve probably goes up a little bit better. And then maybe he actually gets the proper loan move to Europe where he's actually playing. You know what I mean? And now it's like you wonder whether or not like he's ever going to get out of that cycle with Chelsea. It's actually quite sad. But let's turn gears real quick as we close out this talk about the October roster. One of the interesting things that you hear from a lot of top, I guess you could say YouTube, USMNT content creators is how shit Major League Soccer is in relative terms to the U.S. men's national team. But I will say is that I agree with it to an extent. Now, understand that I do believe that Poch thinks I like our player pool is shit. Let's just get that out of the way, right? There's certain positions that we're very good at, and then there's other positions where we have absolutely no depth at all. And I think that's a direct reflection of the player pool that we have. I also think Major League Soccer has been absolute dog shit in actually developing certain positions as well too. Now, in a historical context, we're still doing what we've always done best, man. We've always had a knack for creating really good holding midfielders. Like that is something that we have historically been very good at doing. The occasional good, the good center back pairing. Of course, we have always developed goalkeepers, except for this cycle for some stupid reason. But whatever the case may be, the interesting thing about this is like if you go back to different cycles, Major League Soccer has always played a role with the national team, dating all the way back to the '98 World Cup. Obviously, Major League Soccer came in '96. 2 years later, I think there was 10 Major League Soccer players on that World Cup roster. I think there was 10 in 2000 or 10 or 12 or whatever in 2002. And then, of course, that was with the DeMarcus Beasley and Landon Donovan, those guys coming into the national team in 2000. I think the only year where we had less than 10 was in 2010. But for the most part, everybody seems to think this is a Mauricio Pochettino issue. It's like, dude, you guys got to do your research because Major League Soccer has always been involved with the national team. And there's always been at least anywhere between 8 to 10 players on the national team as well, too. And so that trend is always going to continue to be something that is going to be relevant with the national team. The question to you, I guess, is your thoughts on that partnership, I guess you can say, the influence that Major League Soccer has on the national team.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely there. I mean, it exists, but I don't think that it has to be such a negative all the time. And what I mean by that is, with the idea of the camp cupcake, right? I think that there are certain call-ups that are made where you really can question their merit based on how good the national team is. There's a couple where you just go, this is a head scratcher. This doesn't make sense. For me, last window, that was Tristan Blackman. I'm just going to be honest. But, saying that, I think that there is a lot of opportunity to call in younger players before they make their leap to Europe, potentially, where they are developing. And yeah, I think that's a strong thing. And yeah, let me read that there.
Let me pull it.
Go for it.
Let me pull it right there. There you go.
Yeah, MLS is attacker heavy, and right now there are no American attackers in MLS. That's in. Yeah, I mean, well, but it's tough to tell because at international level, that's a slow development process. There could be some guys there that become that level, but it's tough to tell because a lot of them are buried in academies or haven't gotten their shot yet. I mean, so okay, I would not say Brian White from Vancouver. He's in his nearly 30s, so I wouldn't quite pick him. But I would say, but there are some options where you go, okay. So for example, I mean, this is a guy that he hasn't started doing anything yet, but a Kevin Sullivan, for example, highly hyped. We don't actually know if he's going to be good enough to play for the national team. We don't. We know he's good enough to play for the youth national team. We know that he's going to get minutes with Philadelphia. They're going to give him some minutes before he moves over to Manchester City. So in that way, MLS is great because it does allow you to pull in some of your younger players and get them playing time, and that is valuable. But I don't think there's enough emphasis on the technicality side, and it's still showing. Some of our guys, yeah, we've got effort guys, and I think we need some effort guys on our World Cup roster. That's apparent. We can't just have your flashy guys in Europe that don't care quite as much or are just sort of enjoying themselves because they're naturally talented. That's not enough. We need a couple of effort guys as well. But I think that we don't have enough guys that we can truly say they can dribble through a phone booth kind of. I just don't see it. And I think that's something that's not just developed in MLS. That's also developed as you're younger in your, indoor soccer leagues, for example, where it's a lot more condensed. You need to be able to dribble more, but there's a push towards the technical side versus just run a lot.
Right. The interesting thing, you mentioned Cap Cupcake. It's a very interesting point because, the interesting thing is, Landon Donovan came from Major League Soccer. If you remember, that was in what I like to consider the dark years of Major League Soccer, where the talent was just absolutely dreadful, and yet for whatever reason he was able to excel at the national on the international stage, coming from a league like that. Clint Dempsey actually used Camp Cupcake in 2006 to vault himself into the national team, and of course he made that World Cup squad, which ultimately got him to Fulham after the World Cup in 2006. Charlie Davies also excelled in a Camp Cupcake. I think Kyle Beckerman used Camp Cupcake in 2014 to put himself in the conversation for Brazil 2014 as well too. So there's a lot of examples of players using Camp Cupcake to put themselves in a position come a World Cup year. And I probably assume that's going to be the same thing coming up in 2026, right? And so there's names that come to my mind that I probably would think that would use it. I mean, Diego Luna became a mainstay in the national team because of Camp Cupcake this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a big name for sure. I want to say McGlynn was in as well.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, and he's another one that's really kind of elevated himself because he's got a unique profile. I mean, his left foot is incredible. I think that athletically, he's actually not the quickest player, and that's going to be his one thing that it's really hard to work on because, if you're not a speedster, it's hard to become a speedster, right? But he's got a very good left foot, and I think that he's someone that even if it's not this World Cup, and we'll see, there's a chance he could still make the roster, but by next World Cup, I think he plays a real role. Even with what he's doing, I think they'll build something around him for how technically strong he is with his passing and shooting.
You would also assume that by World Cup 2030, Diego's probably going to be in Europe at that point.
I would hope so, and he seems like the kind of guy that has that level of ambition. But you never know.
And he's playing for the right team. Real Salt Lake will have no problem letting him test himself, right? As opposed to I guess you could say the MLS want of keeping U.S. men's national team players stateside. But that being said, I would think that RSL, if the right deal came, RSL would make it. But the interesting thing is, as we turn the corner real quick, I do want to say that you brought up something just a second ago where the issue of coaching comes to mind, right? Because there's direct correlation when it comes to player development as well too, and there seems to be this weird narrative that the U.S. just does not develop talent. MLS Next Pro is garbage, blah, 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 blah. And the interesting thing is, over the course of the last 30 years, the American player, the American prospect has gotten better. When you look at the youth national teams and you kind of see it, the interesting thing is there always seems to be a plateau, especially for those players that stay in Major League Soccer. There seems to be a plateau versus those young players that go overseas, and then you see a different level, right? And to me, that's not the issue of talent as far as I'm concerned. To me, that's the issue of coaching, right? I'll give you a good example, right? So one of the things that young players want to do is they want to test themselves overseas, right? You always hear about the word challenge. They want to challenge themselves to get better, but you never see coaches wanting to go overseas and challenge themselves as well too, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with Major League Soccer because the money is too good for coaches that want to leave, and especially if you're a young coach with a wife and kids and you don't want to move your family to Brussels, or you don't want to move your family to Germany to be an assistant coach under somebody, right? it just makes sense to stay stateside. But the problem with it is I don't necessarily think the coaching, I guess you could say tactics or philosophies and some of these things, I don't think it's caught up to the actual talent development of this country, because I actually think the talent's actually improved. Where I do think that there is a problem, it's the coaching, and I think that is resemblant in Major League Soccer, because as Harry said here in the chat here, he said, MLS is attacker heavy, and right now there are no American attackers in Major League Soccer that's on an international level. And I think that kind of proves my point, right? The coaching just has not caught up with the actual youth development in this country.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I think that there's a complacency level when you do feel like I've got a spot locked in with my club. And that does translate over to your overall growth, because if you're content with where you're at, you're going to get beat out by the guy that isn't.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing though is it's like even on a youth level, right? Being here in Michigan, I'm very familiar with some of the pay-for-play clubs in this area. And when you look at the fact that even at like a U12 level, these coaches are paid to win, right? So there's not going to be a lot of room for some of these coaches saying, like, just go make a position your own, use flair, use creativity, and just kind of build yourself into the position and just kind of go do your thing. And it's like, no, I need you to pass the ball 30 times. I need you to make 30 touches, and I need you to pass it 5 times to the left, 5 times to the right, because we're trying to spread the ball out. We're playing to the system. And it's like, how are you supposed to develop players? Seriously, how are you supposed to develop players when you're essentially asking them to be, essentially stat robots out on the pitch, right? There's no natural feel for positions. It's like you have a young kid who's showing, showing dynamics, right? Whether it be off the left or the right or central, and all of a sudden you have the coach. It's like, well, that being said, he's good on the ball, so I'm going to move him back to the 6, and I'm going to take everything that he likes about the game. I'm going to strip that away, and I'm going to put him as a holding midfielder because he's actually pretty sound on the ball, right? Like that's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you hear the phrase "go out there and have fun," and you think, "Oh man, that's just such a complacent phrase." But actually, that's the answer to what we need currently. We need that go out there and have fun mentality for our attackers. Make mistakes, do things where you challenge yourself, and you aren't just playing by the raw, boring fundamentals. Like, we need a little more flair, a little more attack. I mean, you can see it with some of like Zendejas, for example. I mean, he doesn't play with a style that I would attribute to what an MLS coach would like. Put it that way.
Correct. What's funny is, like, I keep hearing the word culture. Like, the U.S. doesn't have a soccer culture because I don't see 6-year-olds playing in the street. They're not playing street ball, and it's like, yeah, but that's never going to happen here, right? Because there's so many different options for kids to play, and soccer does not necessarily seem to be on the same level as basketball, where you see young kids playing basketball on the street. But that doesn't mean that we can't still produce good young players, because there's always going to be a pipeline of good young players. One of the biggest challenges is whether, if U.S. soccer is really concerned about growing the game in the United States, then they would actually go above and beyond to make sure that talent is going to be developed correctly in this country. That's the biggest problem, right? It's the reason why they don't want teams letting their young players go overseas, right? Because it's actually a marketing issue, not necessarily a talent issue. It's not a development issue, right? And it begs the question of whether or not U.S. soccer really even gives a shit about the sport in the country. Yeah, that's it. It's true.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Colin Reese says Georgi Mihailovic and Diego Luna are international level attackers who are Americans in Major League Soccer. They're some of our only players who pass and move. Most of our fans complain about them for playing this way. Yeah, maybe. Georgie's with Montreal now, right? Yeah, he's with Montreal.
Yeah, he's bounced around a bunch, but yeah, I think he's
Georgi Mihailovic. Yeah, he went overseas and ended up coming back, if my memory serves me correct. Yeah. All right, so before we go, because we're pushing the hour mark, let me just ask you really quickly, what's your expectations for the October window? But more importantly, the November window. Of course, we have Uruguay and Paraguay in that window, which is going to be an absolute nice test for this, me personally, I think that's actually going to be the ultimate test to see exactly where we stand. But the expectations for the rest of 2025.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to sum up all of those, I want to see us play with a distinct identity, like a style. Yeah. I want to make sure that we're playing not 10 different formations, that we're kind of sticking to one to maybe two. I mean, obviously you can adapt at halftime if depending on opponent, stuff like that. But I want to see how we're going to play so that I know, okay, here's what we have depth wise that's offered that we can work with. And then I want to see our best guys play. Put it that way. I don't want a lot of experimentation with guys anymore. Sure. I kind of want to just see good players play good ball. And honestly, if we come out with if we get a result versus Uruguay and Paraguay, I'd be very happy because I think it would start to move momentum in the right direction for. Okay, we're getting into 2026. We can really capitalize on this, but we've got to have some momentum. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like we're going into this thing unprepared.
I would agree. I actually want to see the U.S. come out and punch Ecuador right in the mouth in the first 10 minutes, right? I actually want this team to get back to the soul and the roots of this national team, which is playing with a lot of swagger, playing with a lot of arrogance, the old American arrogance of being able to step on a pitch, and regardless of whether or not you think the team is talented, but them stepping between the lines and saying, you know what, we're winning today, regardless of who else is on there. Having that arrogance and just going out there and punching him in the mouth and getting a goal within the first 10 minutes and just making a statement. That's the one thing that it has seemed to be lacking in the Mauricio Pochettino era. We have yet to really make a statement. We haven't put our stamp on anything yet, right? So that's something that I would love to see. And I do agree with you about the experimentation. I think that's going to be coming to an end. I think he knows. I think he's seen exactly what he needs to see at the Major League Soccer level. And now I think it's time where we're going to start seeing a lot of these European guys come in and playing. And so the interesting thing to me is whether or not these guys are going to be up for it. Because so far they've been treating international windows as a relaxation treat. It's like it's been
too calm. There needs to be some urgency and some effort there for sure. And I will say some of the MLS guys do bring that. So our international guys playing in Europe, where they are a little more comfortable with their own skill level and where they sit on the national team, they've got to come with some effort, or they're going to get slide tackled to hell by Ecuador.
It's a good team, right? What I really want to see is just a team that is playing hard from whistle to whistle against Ecuador. I actually want to see them play Australia right off the pitch, right? That would be actually entertaining as well too. By the way, Australia hasn't lost in I think 9 straight now. So I mean that's going to the Asian Cup as well too, right? So they're playing pretty well right now too. So like a lot of people just assume that Australia is going to be a walk in the park. It's like I don't know, man. Like the way that we've been playing versus the way that they've been playing, it's like, and that tells me everything too, right? Where it's kind of like you're like, oh shit, Australia. So it's like, all right, well, that's gonna do it for us, Trevor. I want to thank you for coming on tonight, man. It's been really fun. Where can people find you on the old interwebs?
Yeah. I mean, so just on my Twitter page or X page, at Eyes and Vibes. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just USM and Trev. You can search that up as well. I just have a lot of US soccer opinions, but you'll find that I'm fairly measured. I like to sit in the middle with a lot of stuff. I'll give my opinions, but I'm not gonna disregard someone else if they disagree with me. I'm just gonna share it out.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way too. I'm not a Euro snob, and I'm also not like an MLS happy clapper. I'm somewhere kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And just being around this national team, like my first match with the national team, I remember I was 8 years old. It was November of '89. It was actually the Trinidad game where we actually secured our first one. And I remember Gold Cup '91, Copa America '95, Confed Cup '99. It's like I remember those. I remember those World Cup qualifying cycles. In the early 2000s, man, it was interesting to see this team grow, and I could have sworn myself saying like after World Cup 2014, like we were on such an upward trajectory, And then it all just came crashing down. And it's like trying to rebuild from the ashes now. And it's like now we're just in a different generation. And it's like I'm trying to figure out exactly what this national team is about. You know what I mean? Like you just don't know because these players are, for me, are just question marks. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and we will be back later this weekend as well too as we get closer to the English Premier League. I think it's match week 7 now in the Premier League, and so that's going to be fun as well too. I believe my beloved Tottenham Hotspur are playing Leeds United this weekend. Woo, Leeds! So that's going to do it for me. We'll see you this weekend, guys. Have a great night. Give me 1 second. Doop, boop. There it is.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again. I believe that we will win. Through the sweat and the fire within, we rise up when the skies grow dim. I believe that we will win. Mud on our boots, steel in our veins. Feel the heartbeat driving through the pain. Field of battle under shining lights. Every tackle about this fight. I believe that we will win. Push through the noise, drown out the din. No giving up, we dig right in. I believe that we will win. Out on the edge where the brave won't break. With every fall, we got hearts that ache. But we're not done, we're just starting the run. This is the song to the iron in the sun. Shouts from the stands echo.
Thanks, man.